Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Troubadour Talks, where today we are going to talk about Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. Got my book. Hopefully you guys all have your book. And we are joined by Luke Travers from literature at ourhouse.com. Go visit that. Or Google Luke Travers, because there's only one.
There's only one.
So there's only one. So Google Luke Travers. Check him out. He puts out a lot of great work, including his book, Touching the Art. So just check out the stuff that he's putting out there. It's great stuff. He does lectures on paintings and painting and history of painting as well, history of art, which I have always enjoyed. And we have done a show called Surprised by Art in the past. And I think I might bring a little memory back from that.
Oh, I think I know what you might be
you probably do. So
because it's Surprised by Art, like you picked out a poem and I picked out a painting, and we saw how they were related to each other. So it's like a marriage of the arts.
Yeah.
So yeah,
which is fun. And
I think there's a poetry connection here.
There's a poetry. Well, there's also a particular poetry connection.
Oh,
like an actual specific.
Find out what you're thinking of.
And okay, so that's Luke. So check him out, and we're going to be talking about Fahrenheit 451. The way we normally do this is we just do a very broad summary of the story, and then we just discuss what we think it's about, its relevance to us, why we like it, because I really love this book in particular. So there's a lot for me to talk about, and then same with Luke, because you actually chose this book. Now, before we go into why you chose it, let's just try together to do a summary and see if we could do this. I'm doing this without notes, just memories. This is something that I recommend people do. I did not do it when I was younger. And I think a lot of books I read went kind of like, I forgot them. And I think it's a very useful thing to kind of try to summarize it within your own words. So let's see if I can remember this. So it starts off in a futuristic America where firemen do not put out fires. They actually start fires, and they're focused on books. And the main character is Guy Montag, who is starting by putting out starting fires of books. And he meets a young lady named Clarisse,
Yeah.
Who's I think 16, 17, a teenager, was a very curious young girl. And she starts to make him think about what he's doing and why he's doing it. Then I know his mind always goes back to the little hatch of, I guess in the vent or something where he's kept some secret things in there. And when he gets home, his wife has overdosed from sleeping pills. And, later he starts to kind of question things. He goes to the firehouse, and let's see what happens next. So I'm trying to just do broad bullet points. So I guess the next thing is he's really questioning things where he decides, I guess the next big one is the woman who burns herself alive.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It's a pretty big one, pretty big important part, because she has her books, and he gets called to their house, he burns her, and then on the way, and then he goes home, Mildred informs him that Clarisse has died. And then, so yes, there are spoilers, sorry. But this happens pretty early on. It's too late now.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for the win.
Okay, what happens next? So Clarisse is passed, and okay, wait. What happens next? Wait, so Clarisse dies.
I remember Beatty, Captain Beatty, his fire chief.
So Guy goes into a depression, right? He's sick, and Beatty comes over, has a fascinating discussion that I want to talk about in detail later. And then Guy goes to Faber. He goes to Faber, the English professor. They have a discussion. They put the shell in his ear so they can talk, and we can talk about that. And then he goes back home, meets the wife and her friends, reveals to them that he has this stash. And I'm not sure where he goes next, if he goes back to Faber, or maybe I mixed a point up in timeline. But basically next he gets... he goes to the fire department or firehouse, and then he goes to the next call, which is his house. And I think this is the turning point. And then he burns Beatty, spoiler again. And then he runs away, chased by this mechanical hound. And he eventually finds the book lovers who are traveling the world. And then maybe I'll leave the big spoiler for the end. We can talk about that later. The biggest spoiler.
You got me curious what the big spoiler
well,
is.
like the ending thing that happens.
Oh, what?
I won't say who gets up, but
all right.
Okay, there's my cruddy off the cuff. Again, no notes. I didn't prepare. That was just off the cuff, but I did my best.
Well, cool. So what's strike you as the kind of the pivotal scenes?
Well, the ones that stick out for me is the Beatty conversation.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what I love the most. And then the use of language. So like why I love it is the way he uses language, Beatty's speech, and then the discussion about knowledge at the end. When they're walking around and like, what is knowledge? Why is it important? How does it transmit? What does it do? And then I guess I really do enjoy the becoming an individual person that Guy Montag goes through, which he doesn't become a full person, but I think he starts to develop his own individuality a little bit by finding out that he likes things and that he wants to pursue them, and he doesn't know how to initially because he's in this weird dystopian future. But why? So why did you choose this novel of the list that we talked about, just personally?
Yeah, so it's a novel I've taught a couple of times to my high school literature students, and it's one I don't remember reading. Maybe I read it in high school. I think I read it in high school, and it was so to me then. And because I get to experiment all kinds of stuff in my literature classes, I said, okay, let me try this out with my high school students, and enjoyed it pretty well. And the students really enjoyed it, and taught it a second time this fall. And it started becoming more meaningful to me at that point. And I started seeing it. I think I had all kind of seen it as kind of this big picture dystopia novel about a kind of future that we don't want. And since rereading it, and especially this past fall with my high school students, I started seeing it more as a very personal story about how honest are you going to be with yourself, and that psychological story and how it can be affecting for a young person or anybody who's trying to figure out what is meaningful in their life and what is meaningful about themselves and how to face reality or turn away from it. That kind of introduction to psychology is something that I found really intriguing, and I thought that there's some wonderful insights. And I love Clarisse. I love Clarisse.
Oh man, that was horrible.
So
she's wonderful. Yeah, I think there's with a little dandelion under the chin, you find out if you're in love. You're not in love, and guy's like, I'm in love. What are you talking about? I'm married. But she's very insightful, very observant, and very truthful. She's like a child, in that she spits out everything that she thinks, and that might get her in trouble. And I think, she considers herself antisocial, but she's a wonderful character that I wish there was more of her in the story. It's actually quite a short little passage, but it's wonderfully written. But there's the idea of the individuality, I think, is often overlooked with this book because of, like you said, the focus on the dystopian stuff, which is good. I mean, it's an interesting dystopian criticism of certain things. And I think that's very much what inspired Ray Bradbury and what he was going for. It's there and it's really important. And I would love to talk about it. But I think the developing of, like you're saying, the psychology of developing your own self, of independence, of learning to face reality is really challenging because we're all confronted we're all confronted with the problem that Guy Montag realizes he's in. And that problem is that we are within this world that's the byproduct of thousands of years of civilized development, right? Like all the information we get a mind dump into our brains when we're kids, we have to, do we take it on faith? Like, how do we know it's true? Was Benjamin Franklin the first firemen, right? That's what they're taught in this world. And, we're taught things, about the founding fathers or about and how do we know that that's not just a fabrication like these? So there is, I think, that issue of that guy is confronted with of who do I trust? How do I know? When he's talking to Faber, it's the same thing. And he points the same thing out to Faber that, well, I was following Captain Beatty. Now I'm just going to follow you. Like, wait a second, like that, and then Faber's like, that's actually a really good point. You are going to have to just trust me for now and develop it later. That's basically what Faber tells him at that.
Okay. So I think it sounds like, you're looking at kind of the development of him as an individual as he's trying to go process what's true with books, what's false with what he's learned from his society and Captain Beatty, and finding himself. I think for me, the part that intrigues me most is the beginnings, where he meets Clarisse, and Clarisse sends him on a kind of quest to find meaning in his life. He comes to her and she asks him a question. Now they meet haphazardly, but he stays, and you talk about the moon and talk about the dew on the grass and these observations she's making that he's never really paid attention to. But she asks him a question that kind of spins him around and starts to make him question things, and that is, are you happy?
Mm.
And when she asks him that, his first answer is, yeah, I'm happy. In fact, in the opening scenes, we see him like broadly grinning as he's burning things. But he starts to realize, wait, am I really happy? And it's that night that Millie has overdosed, and he's thinking, whoa, is she depressed? Is she unhappy? And of course, we learn how Millie spends all her time vacuously staring at the four walls, the family of I guess video programs that she watches, and keeps constantly these earbuds in that constantly play things for her so that she never has to pay attention to what her actual state of mind is, because she's constantly a distraction, unlike Clarisse, who has no distraction except for absorbing in what the world. So that kind of initial question that Clarisse poses him, and then his investigation into himself, and then you brought up the dandelion thing, where she asks him, "Are you in love?" Which is like the next question, and are you happy? Are you in love? And he realizes, whoa. After he confronts her and says, "Yes, I'm in love," he realizes he's not in love. And he asks that to Millie. Doesn't he ask like to Millie, do you remember when we first met?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
he doesn't know.
And I think that goes to an important theme about the importance of memory in this story and what memory does. But which we can hold off for a minute, because I think what you're pointing out is really good. Like Clarisse's role, like I said earlier, is very short, but it's the instigating event. It's
Would
powerful.
You say it's the spark?
It's the spark. Absolutely. It's the huge spark that leads to the conflagration at the end of the story, that I was talking about. But the question, I think that...
but Kirk, I'll interject. I think that the more important conflagration is not in what happens, but in what happens in him. In him. The fire that burns in him. So that's the thing that I think I've gotten more out of the story, how he burns everything down within himself to start anew.
Yeah, because I think the question that bounces around in his mind is, how can Clarisse exist? And, that's what makes him start questioning everything. It's like, how can this little girl, who I think he's in love with, by the way, I think that's his first flickerings of love, is my impression. But
I don't know.
I mean, I don't know if it's a sexual love. I just mean it's like he starts feeling something for her, and that's why he gets depressed when not just because someone died. I mean, he saw a woman burn herself as well. But I think her, and he's been a part of this world, but he sees like, okay, here's this odd little girl who talks about dandelions and the moon, and she's antisocial, and she, she's dangerous. She says she's dangerous because she doesn't. No, I'm sorry. Captain Betty later tells him that they've been keeping an eye on that family, and that Clarisse is an interesting girl because she is one of those people who doesn't ask how, but asks why. And I think that is a, important thing, like you're saying about her curiosity. She wants to know, like, what do these nuts do, right? She has like some acorns or something. Like, how do they work? How does this work? How, can you tell if someone's in love if you put a dandelion under their chin? And, she just asks, she's inquisitive and she wants to know things. And I think Montag, who burns books and secretly stashes them away, or a couple of them away, and doesn't know why he does that. He doesn't know why Mildred does the things that she does. He has no concept.
Oh, you mean
that.
Clarisse?
No, Mildred. Yeah. I mean, Clarisse as well, but I'm saying, like, he doesn't know why people behave the way they do. So why, like, he questions, did Mildred kill herself? Like, did she have a moment of reckoning, or was she just so, she took a couple and then she took a couple more and then she took a couple more and didn't, realize what was going on.
And I think he deep down, he knows the truth, and it's his is starting to admit to himself, burning down those things within him that have prevented him from seeing reality in the face. And I think that's fundamentally what Clarisse has, how Clarisse is similar to books as they're presented in this world, that they help you to see reality straight in the face and to look at yourself. I've got a great quote here. Please. I think this is from Faber. And he says, "So now do you see why books are hated and feared? They show the pores in the face of life. The comfortable people want only wax moon faces, poreless, hairless, expressionless, like Mildred's TV shows."
Yeah.
And Clarisse and great literature offers you the opportunity to see reality in the face and to see yourself in the face.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, so this goes to the nature of this as a dystopian story in terms of what I think Bradbury is criticizing in terms of mass. And he has this whole, so like what you're talking about, like what books do. So it's what literature, what reading does, but books in specific, and now not necessarily the form. And we'll talk about like how the form of a book, like it could, like an ancient scroll is just, it's good. It's really about the letters, I think, is important, and the words, the specific ideas and concepts. Yeah. That's what's important.
Having lots of different ideas.
Having those,
contradict each other, that are controversial, that make you think, that make you question. That's, I think, the core of what's going on.
Make you question everything. Sure. Right. And that's a huge thing, because that's Captain Betty's problem. Like, that's what he says. That's why we have to burn the books, is because it's insanity.
Yeah,
that's what's in books.
That he gives.
Yeah, that speech, like, it's what's in books is insanity. And so this is kind of the dilemma in the dystopian world, that you have. Well, you can read books and you can possibly go insane, because who's the answer? What's do we have free will or determinism? Do we have this or do we have that? Do we have all these things? Or, you can live in this world where we're not confronted with choice. Like, there's that one beautiful, horrific line. I can't remember what it goes exactly, but Beatty is like, when don't give a man two choices, give him one, or better yet, none. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And that is, and he's talking politically, but I think he means it generally. Like, he was talking about like parties, like two parties, but he says, don't give them two parties or two ideas, give them one, and better yet, give them none. And I think that, when we're talking about what's in books, so there's these good things that you're talking about, but he's right. Like, it's sometimes atheism or theism, Christianity or Islam, right? Free will. Are we free willed, or are we just thrown around? A man can go insane, right? Should we have science, or should we have, theocracy or something?
I want to explore that idea of insanity a little bit more. I think I remember you're right. He does use that term. The feeling I got mostly is it brings unhappiness.
That's even better. Yeah.
It brings unhappiness because it brings discomfort. It brings controversy, and the core of happiness for Beatty is, uh, you eliminate the problems of life.
And you give
Eliminate
people
the
what they
problems.
want, what they say they want, like in terms of
Sure.
satiate them, right? And this is something that was a big thing in communism that I think is happening in the 1950s when this is written, the idea of a utopia. And but I think this idea of giving everybody everything that they need, this is, give them all the food they need, all the movies and entertainment they need, just give it to them. Right.
Yeah.
And that will, like you're saying, I think that will be quote unquote happiness.
And make that life go by fast. No distraction, no moments for thinking, no moments for pausing and flipping pages in a book. Just make those cars go by so fast. They got to make the billboards 200 feet wide. Make when he's on the subway or that train and he's got the constant commercials,
dentifrice,
whatever it is. Having a constant distraction in life to not make you pause to reflect on things, whether it's in a book, whether it's looking at the dew on the grass or up at the moon, because those things can lead down to thinking, which can lead to sadness, and you want to avoid that. I think he calls the firemen the happiness boys, and that their task is to put their finger in the dike to prevent the flood of sadness that books can bring.
Yeah. And books can definitely make you sad, right? I mean, like I was sad when Clarisse died. We just made people sad by ruining it for them. No, hopefully you guys are okay with it and not too mad at me for that. But, I was sad.
Extremely sad. And that brings me to thinking about that teaser that you had at the beginning about the piece of literature that you wanted to bring up. Because for me, that scene became the most powerful for me of the entire book, rereading it. You remember the scene?
The scene where he's reading to the women?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what poem that is?
I do.
Do you remember?
I knew it. I knew it because we did it together with Surprised by Art, and I was really excited to see it when I taught it last fall. I was like, oh, I know that poem. Kirk told me all about it, and we experienced it together. So just to set the context, and then maybe you could share the poem. He's already met Faber, the English professor, the heretical English professor, and Faber is going to help him out by giving him a communication device in his ear, so that when he has to encounter Beatty again, because now they've got this plan about this.
Well, because Beatty's he's knowledgeable. Like he has read books. So whenever Montag tries to have an argument, he's not intellectually prepared, but Faber is.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And so Mildred has friends over and they're going to party and distract themselves and watch TV. And suddenly, Guy gets fed up and he sees the vacuousness. I think they do talk about politics and why one presidential candidate should win because he's more handsome and I do think that they talk about kids and how have the cesarean sections and don't and then put the kids away. Don't worry about it's you got to procreate, but don't bother yourself with things that are going to be painful. And I think one of the women that's there has something painful in her life, that her husband is in the military and he's not coming back.
He went to war. Yeah.
Or he's gone, and they're not going to talk about that. They're just focus on distracting themselves from anything that might be harmful. And Guy sees that and he breaks open a poem. And that poem, Kirk, is
Dover Beach by Matthew Arnold. And I just, to say what you were, so we could talk about that in a second, but just to play on what you were saying with those women, one thing that, so what we try to do with bringing art to people, both of us in our own ways, this is something that I just found fascinating that, this is in the 50s. It was already happening then, and it was happening even earlier than that to some degree, but it's way exaggerated today. And it's when Mrs. Boyle says, "As for poetry, I hate it," said Mrs. Boyles. "Have you ever heard any?" And she's like, and she, basically, I don't think she answers, but, the assumption is no. And I think that is something I hear all the time is like people hate it. Now, maybe they've heard one or two things, but you know,
I've had English class. Everybody's had an English.
yeah, everybody's had a couple, but I highly doubt they've really spent any amount of time, you know, with it, right? With poetry at all. So, but I do think there's like a hatred of it without actually experiencing it. So I thought that was really wonderful. Now, why this poem? Now, do you want me to read any part of it? Do you think maybe I'll read?
Yeah, I think there are a couple parts that are.
He reads the second.
How about from the beginning of the Sea of Faith? That part.
That's
right
what
there.
he has.
I think those are the two parts that are quoted. In
yeah.
Stanzas.
So let me see if I can. Whoops, that's not working. I was trying to share this so people could see it with us.
Oh, your voice is plenty good to make us feel the melancholy of the waves.
Okay. All right. So let's do Sea of Faith. So this is Matthew Arnold's Dover Beach, but it's only the second half. So if you want to read the first half, I recommend that. But you could always go to Surprised by Art and listen to episode 1 and do that there and listen and explore it with us. But okay. So the Sea of Faith was once two at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. But now I only hear its melancholy, long withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind down the vast edges drear and naked shingles of the world. Ah, love, let us be true to one another, for the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy nor love nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. And we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night.
So, Kirk, why do you think you read that poem to them?
Well, my take on that poem is that it's essentially about this conflict that's occurring the conflict between knowledge and faith, right? Between gaining new knowledge and understanding the world and having faith. And so I think this poem for Montag represents his own struggles and what he's trying to understand in the world. And particularly the famous lines, and we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night. Like the idea of ignorant armies clashing by night. And, you know, it's helpful to think in this story of Fahrenheit 451, there's these wars going on outside. But also what he does, he's fighting these fires and he doesn't know why he's doing it. He's in the dark and he's hating things. He's burning things without any kind of knowledge. So I think for him, you know, love, let us be true to one another, for the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new. Like, I just think this is, well, that's Clarisse, right? And I think he's exploring these new things that he's just never in his whole life ever contemplated. And Dover Beach is about this kind of, overall is about this kind of contemplation of, you know, we have this massive new world of science or new ideas. And then we have this old world of faith. And like, is there a clash and can we live with it? And I think that kind of, and then where's, you know, I think what you're saying, like, where's the happiness with it? Do we live happily with it? Can we live happily? Are we human if we, is there something in us that's human in that kind of tragedy with, you know, like, I'm trying to think about how to phrase this, that we can't, that getting everything we want or having our choices limited isn't what we actually want or need as psychologically, or, you know, some part of us is the tragic, some part of us is the problem, or is this insufficient.
Yeah,
like
and
that makes us human.
Jump on that.
Please,
that idea, because I think he's partially reading it for himself, but I think a lot of it is he's reading in response to seeing Mildred and her friends and their fake happiness. And that's something that upsets them throughout, seeing that no, they're not really happy. Mildred is not really happy because she OD'd. And this is something
Yeah.
he's discovered about himself. I'm not happy. And this poem is helping him see not just his own happiness, but he gets angry and wants to throw the poem in the face of these women and say, look at yourselves. You're not happy. And it works.
Yeah.
Because one of the women starts to cry. And I'm pretty sure it's the one who has her husband off fighting in the war. And the other two women there, Mildred and Mrs. Boyles, they look at the one who's crying and they're wondering, oh no, what's going on? She's crying. They don't know what to do. The immediate solution that Mildred had is, oh, let's go party and let's go turn on the wall TVs and let's go distract ourselves.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about it. And Guy wants to talk about it. And I think for me, this scene has become the pivotal one in the plot as well as the pivotal one thematically for the novel.
Oh yeah.
Because it's the one that gets him ratted out. It's the one that breaches his life with his wife. His wife at this point now is going to leave him. And this is the point at which of no return where Beatty shows up because he's been turned in. And was it his wife that turned him in?
Mildred turns him in. Yeah.
Mildred. Yeah. His wife turns him because of this.
Yeah.
And he needs to lash out and say, this world that you're creating for yourself, Mildred and your friends, this is not right. You are unhappy and you're not letting yourself see it. And here comes Beatty ready to burn books, anything that would have the same sentiment that Guy is trying to communicate here.
Yeah.
Be real.
Yeah. And I think that you're right about this is a core of the theme. And for me, it's also so true in terms of like, it's a real observation of reality and how we live. I was just, whenever I read this and just thinking about like me on TikTok or listening to some silly podcast, which I don't want to condemn these things for the sake of condemning them.
Our podcast is not silly.
Yeah, exactly. We don't have any silliness.
Earbuds in.
Yeah, don't give up on us yet. Yeah, but there is some of that where there's no, like they talk about this with Clarisse and others, where there's the quiet, right? There's the moment of reflection, and reading is a big part of that. But there's no moment of reflection. They even mention that they don't even mourn the dead, right? There's no funerals,
right?
And
that's right.
Because they don't want to they don't want to, like you were saying, they don't want to be unhappy and they don't want to reflect. But so that idea of all these distractions is not real happiness, even if you're laughing, right? And even if you like, I think about this all the time when I ask somebody, so how you doing? And everyone always says, oh, I'm great, right? And I always wonder, are you? Like, I really want to know. Of course, I can't say that because then I'm just a jerk. But and I try not to be too much. I left my Kirk the jerk days behind. I try to anyway. But that idea of
I'm going to try to bring it back.
Bring back Kirk the jerk. But yeah, I mean, I think like that's something that is difficult to acknowledge. Like, are we happy? All these happiness statistics. Like, what's the happiest country? How do you even measure that? Like, is it just that people say they're happy because they have a car and a house and they're married, but maybe deep down it's the wrong house, the wrong job, and the wrong wife or husband, right? Like, so, and they just don't know how to confront that. So, but I think when you just like this idea of Mildred being distracted all the time and the scene you're pointing out and why he's throwing this in their face, that you're not happy either. Like the world that Betty's talking about, they weren't happy, but maybe, but you're also definitely not happy. This is not a good thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's his motivation. I think you're right.
You know what I wish, Kirk? I wish Guy could have read Dover Beach, could have read that poem with Clarisse. Because I think if I think that would have been a very different kind of scene.
Yeah.
Is reading that poem to Clarisse. I think Clarisse would have loved it, and it would been a bonding moment for them. So this feels like
Yeah.
oh, I think Faber, as he's listening in, he's kind of like, oh, you made me feel like 20 years younger, even though you weren't. It's this kind of youthful energy, rebellious energy that he needs to exercise at this moment against the conventions of the culture that he's a part of. Like he's like a teenager, even though how old is he? 30, 35, something like that.
Yeah, he's in
This
his
is
30s.
teenager rebelling moment that he needs to have.
That he didn't have as a kid. Well, while he's reading that, Faber is saying, like, don't do it, you fool, you fool, don't do it, don't do it. And this, I think, goes to the independence thing I was talking about earlier, where, I think you're right. He's so motivated. He wants to throw it in their face, and he's not going to listen to Beatty. He's not going to listen to Faber. He's only going to listen to himself, right? And this is what he wants to do. Bad consequences be damned. And what I like about Guy as a character is that he lives up to the bad consequences and he deals with it, right? The bad consequences, like you said, is his wife leaves him and she tells on him and he has to kill his former boss and run away and he gets stabbed by the Hound. And
let's talk about the killing of the boss. Does he have to do it?
So I'm trying to remember the scene specifically. I don't know how to answer that question. I think yes. It's not, not just thematically, but I think he needs to get away and the captain is too smart to let, the other people are just not crafty enough to catch him, but the captain would probably catch him and he would probably know about these roving bands. I mean, the thing I got about the captain, my impression was that he almost, was okay with dying. Like it was almost like to me to some degree that he was so tortured that I always took him as tortured. Yeah. And
really?
Yeah, because he knows all these things. He's quoting poetry and books all the time.
But isn't he doing it as a way to shut down the arguments that Guy and Faber come up with? There's the last big conversation that they have is like, Beatty describes a dream that he has where he and Guy are having a conversation where Guy is quoting literature, different quotes that support independence of thought and a free society and the knowledge of and within books. And Beatty is quoting authors himself that contradict, that are answers to the arguments that are being made by Guy. So I think he's kind of illustrating the point of the futility, and I'm doing air quotes for listeners, of the futility of literature, of books, because they're going to contradict each other and they're going to, as you said before, they're going to drive you insane. I didn't see him as tortured. I saw him as I'm just so over it. Or I know so much about how this works, and I know everything that you're going to do.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of the paradox of his character. And I'm not saying that he definitely wanted to die for sure. I got the inclination that, when he says things like to Guy, you don't have some books, do you? I thought like he knows he has books. Like Guy,
of course he does.
Yeah, Guy is or Beatty is. Guy is going to turn into Beatty, right? Beatty is the guy in charge.
You got three different pronunciations of the captain going on.
Well, how do you know Beatty? How do you pronounce it?
I pronounce it Beatty.
Beatty. I think Beatty's probably correct.
Audiobook, and Tim Robbins was in the audiobook, and he said Beatty, so I trust Tim
Robbins.
I
think Beatty is correct.
So yeah. And the player.
We'll stick with Beatty. Yeah, I'll go with Beatty. But yeah, I think Beatty is. He knows all these arguments. He's read this, but he also understands, the same thing that happens when you read is that, well, there's a joy in that tragedy. And he knows that there's something wrong, even though he has these arguments and he knows that people might go to this other civil war that he talks about, that part of it is, he knows the same thing that Guy knows, like the whole thing that happened with Mildred. Beatty knows that. Like, he's aware of those types of things and about the unhappiness. And my take was just that.
Is he?
Huh?
Is he aware of that?
Well, I think he would have to be, because again, he's very knowledgeable about everything.
Well, maybe he is aware of that, but he doesn't. Maybe he's aware of that, but it doesn't seem to be something that presses his mind. So there's one part that makes me think of him as absolutely vile and disgusting, and he's a villain, and there's nothing to redeem him. And that's when they're both at the, he's gonna ask Guy Montag to burn his own house down after Mildred has left, and he's caught Guy, and then he catches Guy looking next door at the empty house where Clarisse had been. Mm-hmm. And then he talks about Clarisse, and he says, "I'm like, oh, did she get to you?" And he sees Montag's reaction. He says, and he realizes, oh, she did. And then he starts bad-mouthing Clarisse and her quarter moons and her grasses and all that. He understands what's on the other side. He understands Clarisse, and he doesn't want anything to do with her. And that's what's making me think there's no conflict within him about what he represents. I think he's giving leash to Guy. He's not coming down on him hard, because he's got some understanding of what Guy might be going through, because it sounds like a lot of firemen will pick up a book and look at it, and he's experienced that. He understands the allure of the books. I think that's Kirk. I think that's it. He understands the allure of the books.
Yeah. But
I don't think he is personally conflicted about it. I think he himself is like, it's pretty solid. Let's crush those Clarisses in life.
I think he's made his decision. I think he's I think he's definitely made his decision. He's okay with his decision. And his relationship with Guy is a kind of father-son type thing. And he expects that he can control this person. Right. And so there is, but I always just got the impression that there was a kind of flicker of uncertainty, because he knows, I'd have to reread that whole scene when he's about to die, in particular. And, and even leading up to it, like the little snide remarks that he has where he's kind of looking at Guy. Yeah, he has these wonderful remarks. He's a great villain. I mean, he's a horrific. I agree with you. I think he's a horrible person, precisely because he should know better. Right.
Yeah.
So he has read the books. He knows better. He knows Faber is correct, and he makes the decision to burn anyway. And so that's why he's so evil. And I guess, I'm going to side a little bit more with you than maybe before with your interpretation that he's more solid. But I just think the debate for him, or the challenge for him, is walking the tightrope with Guy to get Guy's consciousness to his, right? Yeah. And there's this one in his speech that he does to him. I wanted to see, before we finished our discussion today, I wanted to talk about the issue of mass media, mass television, radio, the thing that I think is a really important part of this a thematic thing that I don't want to miss before we go. Beatty says, picture it, 19th century man with his horses, dogs, carts, slow motion. Then in the 20th century, speed up your camera, books cut shorter, condensations, digest, tabloids, everything boils down to the gag, the snap ending. And, he goes on with that. And he talks about like Hamlet and how everything is put into this condensed mode. And, this idea of snapping up, and the language of this is very unusual, of this whole story, of this whole book, I should say, for a lot of us. But I love it. I think it's very poignant, or it's purposeful in what Bradbury is trying to do. And there's this one beautiful thing that, if I saw a video of this, like a little TED Talk, where they put these in big words and it like flashed in front of your eyes, and it was very useful. When Beatty is talking to Guy about the speed and like how, this kind of is like, don't stop and think, don't do this. He has this whole thing where he says, speed up the film, Montag, quick, click, pick, look, I, now, flick, here, there, swift, pace, up, down, in, out, why, how, who, what, where, bang, smack, wallop, bing, boom, boom, digest, politics, one column, 2 sentence, a headline, then in midair all vanishes. Whirl man's mind around so fast under the pumping hands of publishers, exploiters, broadcasters, at the centrifuge flings off all unnecessary time-wasting thought. I just thought that was just wonderful. The idea of all these flashing things, and I just think about how prescient that is to our own time of sound bites and little moments and, headline reading and all the things that we have today. And this is how he's trying to, again, control Montag's mind.
Don't tell me how much I'm distracted by my iPhone.
Yeah, exactly. So I just thought that in particular was important, and just how he tries to, like you're saying, he's trying to navigate Guy's individuality. Well, because if Guy's going to take over at some point, he has to know enough. He has to know some of these words. He has to know what they're doing. And in order to have the same mentality that Beatty has. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, this little speech about this is why we do what we do. And, we give people what they want, and the way to do it is to speed up the film, Montag, right? Make it go fast.
And one of the effects of that is, I think he describes as you're undercutting the meaning of the deeper meaning of things when you, have a classics in 15 minutes.
15-minute digest. Yeah.
Yeah. And that makes me think of the big chase scene. I guess the third part of the book, where Guy is escaping the Hound as he tries to escape, escape the city with Faber's help. And it's told through mass media. It's told through this, here's the newsreel that's going on, exciting chase scene going on. And we see it completely through the media that's being portrayed to kind of make it into this titillating, exciting, made-for-TV event.
Yep.
In fact, they do make it for TV.
They do make it for TV because they lie.
He escapes, but they find somebody else to kill.
Yeah, some poor schlub on the street.
Exactly. So it's there as mass media consumption, even the big chase. So that ties in, Mildred is going to be watching that along with her TV shows, not as a form of let's step back and understand our civilization more and why this individual is running away, but exciting chase scene at 8 p.m. tonight. Join us live.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things about this being a dystopian and what we're seeing in terms of the setting and what Ray Bradbury is pointing out about this kind of the mass media, having everything headlines, the putting it into a story that has to fit or whatever perfectly, is that this is how a society this is how a government in particular controls its people. Like that. The reason that they can't tell the truth, one reason, is that it shows that they caught Montag, and it didn't matter who it was, that they were still in control. So all the people knew who was in control. And I think this is the kind of dystopian world that Ray Bradbury is worried about, where that's what you're susceptible to if you don't take the time to contemplate, right? If you don't stop to think, if you allow yourself to be in the speed up time, way of thinking, especially a whole society, because something that I think Beatty points out is that this wasn't like some evil government. This was, what the people wanted. The people were the ones who led to the kind of firemen burning books.
Pain hurts.
Because pain hurts.
And so
we don't want to be unhappy. Let's be happy.
Exactly.
Let's just be happy. So let's not read a book that makes us sad. Let's not make and you mentioned this earlier. We didn't talk about this much, but the idea of he has this whole thing about minorities, and he doesn't mean racial minorities necessarily. He talks about how this is in the Beatty speech. He talks about how when you sped things up, and then you had not any time for thinking, for contemplation, then you just had a whole bunch of minorities, and he just meant. He'd said Texans and, women and he did say like blacks and Jews and but all kinds of minorities, not just one kind. And he was just saying they all started hating each other. right? And they all started like talking bad about, or canceling's my term, but that's essentially what I think he's saying is like shutting that down, or what did he say? He said, burn Uncle Tom's Cabin because it offends white people. Burn this other book because it offends black people. Burn this book and that's how it starts, right? Is you burn this, you burn that because it offends this group, burn it and I just couldn't help but think about cancel culture and like how we are and some of the same books that were on there, like Uncle Tom's Cabin or excuse me, Huckleberry Finn, I think is the one actually I could be wrong. I don't remember which book he does anymore, but anyway, they're actual books that, people want to burn today. So I just found that really interesting. His logical step in the 1950s of, as we, this is the beginning of TV, right? And
the beginning of the distracted lives that people would live by not reading books, but instead of getting their mass media consumption in bits and pieces. Yeah.
Well, and also like he did live through the radio era, and he mentions it's in here. So the radio era did, give you like a 30-minute Shakespeare play, right? And that's kind of one of the things that he mentions in here about King Lear and how they would, give you like this quick little thing, which I think bothers Ray Bradbury. Like he wants you to take a long time to experience it and to, read through it and contemplate. That slow is good. I mean, he's anti-speed reading. Like, there's a lot of business people who try to speed read. Don't speed read. Now, speed read the documents you don't need to read, but not everything is meant to be speed read. And a lot of things should be slowed down. You should take your time and contemplate. I mean, Dover Beach. I mean, that was a hard one for you and I when we were talking about it.
Get a sense of and to understand it clearly.
And I still struggle with that one.
So I'm going to kind of try to pull a thread through a lot of the things that we're talking about. You brought up kind of like the cancel culture stuff that you're kind of seeing. Like, let's take controversial ideas that are not accepted. This is me speaking as Beatty, and let's shut those down because those are going to cause disharmony and unhappiness. So media or suppression of books, burning of books, and is an eradication of controversial ideas or ideas that are going to be too real. And I'm pulling the thread through here, that are going to make people unhappy because there is a conception of happiness that is part of the society. And I'm pulling the thread more, and that conception of happiness is one of avoidance of pain and constant distraction of superficial pleasure. And pulling that thread even more. So what Guy Montag needs to see is to peel away not just his role as a fireman, but peel away his the idea of happiness that society has placed on him and see that is not the case. And so Clarisse is the instigator that helps him start to peel that away, to discover what is truly going on, how he is miserable in his life, and leads him to try to understand more thoroughly why this society is the way it is, which then leads him to Faber, which then leads him to escaping everything and killing Beatty. So let's talk about the very ending. Yeah.
So when he leaves the hound, or he escapes the hound by jumping into the river, and goes in there, and there's a scene when he comes out and he thinks the hound is there, but it's just a deer. And there's this like moment of just accepting the slowness in nature. I think that in the writing,
he turns into Clarisse. That's the moment. Do you have a quote on that?
No, I don't. Oh, okay. Sorry. I was trying to find one.
Your book, and I was thinking, because I remember that scene. He has become Clarisse at this moment.
Yeah, I think he's definitely very curious.
Or not become her, but he's got that mindset.
He's got some of that mindset. I mean, that's the mindset, that led him to Faber. He specifically says, like, this, I remember sitting on this bench talking to this person about literature, and it made me think of Clarisse, right? Like, and that's why he goes back and he kept that person's name, and that's Mr. Faber. And he goes there, and Mr. Faber's terrified, right? At first.
He's been an oddball the whole time.
Yeah,
we've got to realize it too. He fooled us at the beginning with that big grin as he's burning things.
Yeah.
So he encounters a bunch of vagabonds that have interesting names.
Oh, I don't remember their names actually. Do you? Fred Clement, maybe?
No. They are all named after the
Sorry, go ahead.
books that the books that they have memorized.
Yeah, and so then the ending is he has this conversation with these individuals, these vagabonds, about, you know,
When you say vagabooks?
Vagabonds. Yes, they are. And,
Kirk, why did you make me do a silly pun?
I was trying. Now it's silly because he said it was silly. I was rolling with it, brother. But these vagabooks are individuals who are, memorizing these books, like you're saying, and each one, like there's Origin of the Species, or there's Macbeth or something like that. I don't remember all of them, but they're each memorizing a whole work. And there's like a young girl, I think, or boy who's, not quite this one work, and he's working on it, I think. And, but the point that I found really interesting is why they're doing this, and what I think Bradbury's saying about one about books, that he's not necessarily saying they have to be in this printed form, and that he's just for books, right? Like he's for the knowledge in there. He's pro slowing down, reading these, listening to them and memorizing. I do think there's a big thing where he is so adamant about the importance of memorization and how it improves your memory. And why it's important to do that. I think that's something that they talk about at the end of it.
He's gone way back to the oral tradition with this.
Yeah. And, these technologies. So I will end real quick, because I know we have to go in a few minutes, but I do think there's a little bit of an anti-technology strain through this work. There's for instance, the very poignant scene of Mildred lying down, having the sleeping pills, those two guys who are pumping her. It's a description of all these tubes and technology things in her. And these two guys smoking, like not really caring. That'll be $50, by the way. They're very distracted. They don't care. They're basically like plumbers who are they don't care about the human suffering happening right before them. And I think there is a kind of, there's an anti-technology thing in Ray Bradbury in general, and in this book in particular, that I'm not a big fan of, because I do like technology. But I think his point is that we do have to defend ourselves with slowing down, and I take it to be a pro-memorization thing, right? Like you should memorize as a powerful
tool. And I think you're right that he's seeing the technology part of things as be wary of making it part of your not being in touch with yourself and distracting you. Yes. So even the medical people, they're there to, let's get rid of the consequence of that OD real quick. And Mildred wakes up and it's like, oh, yeah, did I OD? What are you talking about? I'd never do such a thing. So it's a way of denying. So I've got a couple quick things here. You told me you were especially interested in understanding, how we could take the ideas in this book and like apply them to our lives. And I've got a couple questions for you, if you like, Kirk.
Yeah.
Because I think they're two big questions that I like to take away, like personal connection questions that I think this book really makes me think about. And the first one is, Kirk, when have you met someone who has made you question your lifestyle, habits, culture, values? When have you met someone who has made you question your lifestyle, habits, culture, values?
I think maybe 2 times I've fallen in love with a girl, that was a big part of it. We had certain similarities, but there's also some big differences that I found very intriguing. And it did, like being in that moment of love. I think this is why I see maybe it's a little bit of myself and Guy falling in love with Clarisse, is that love does tend to be a very open moment in a person's life when they're truly in love, I think. When you're open to new things, let's try this, And so for me, there's those 2 moments, other than, reading books. So there are books that have had that impact for sure. What about you?
I'd say it's probably one of them is encountering my friend Lee, meeting him when I was like 16, 17, and seeing, wow, this kind of person can exist. And so, but I want to encourage anybody who's listening. I'll call this the Clarisse question. So this is what happens to Guy. And so if you can think of a moment in your life that is like that, then you're going to bond with Guy even more as he, with the help of Clarisse, starts to question his life. I've got another question for you.
Yeah, but I think that's a great question for people to ask, is to make it relevant to your life. Who is your Clarisse?
Yeah.
That changed everything.
Who is your Clarisse? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this is a question I was just thinking of, like, as we're talking. What's a work of literature that's going to make you weep in self-reflection, or any work of art, or any book or song? What is it that's going to be so personal it makes you weep in understanding more of yourself? It's something that's going to deeply affect you, just like Dover Beach Effects. Who is it again? Oh, I think her name is.
Oh, it's
Mrs.
like
Phelps.
Betsy or Betty.
Yeah, Mrs. Phelps, I think is her name. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Just as
I got that way off.
As I want to. Does Guy have one of those?
Does he have a moment like that?
Does he have a work that makes him?
Well, I mean, I think the Sea of Fate. I think that does that for him too.
You think?
But I think Clarisse does that. Interestingly, I saw the HBO movie, and it's Notes from the Underground that does it for the character in that book.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, which is very interesting. And
no, that's a nice pull there.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's
you,
what does it.
Is there something like that?
That's a good question. I mean, yeah, there have been definitely several moments. A lot of times it's so, like, when it comes to just stories, or there's a poem that really affects me and I haven't figured out exactly why. I think it's because I don't know if it's an internal personal thing, but it's Gunga Din by Rudyard Kipling. I cannot read that without crying, and for some reason. And it's one of the few works that really does that to me every time. And I've read it like 100 times, and I read it even in a row, and it still makes me do it. It's crazy. I know, when I was younger, The Fountainhead was something, maybe not weep, but it was a very personal one for that sake. The Iliad, for sure. And there are some Wordsworth poems that have definitely been self-reflective for me. So there's a variety of things. But your question was something that's personal that made you weep.
That encourages that you see yourself in, that reflects who you are, and makes you, doesn't put a mask on, but makes you look more deeply inside of you. And I think what you're talking about at Gunga Din might be a great example there.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what it is with Gunga Din. If people don't know, this is a poem about a man who he was a warrior in a war in India, and there's this character Gunga Din who's the water boy essentially for the troops, and they treat him poorly until they need him, and it's just a reflection on. Oh man, I'm gonna get the chills if I say this, but I don't have any of it memorized, but just a reflection of like how they want to treat him, like how they now want to treat him better, I guess. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe I didn't treat somebody well when I was younger or something. And I wish I treated them better. Something like that. That could be part of why that poem does something so powerful to me. Because that's what it's about. It's about, like finding out that this person had a good soul and you didn't recognize it at the time.
Sounds like Ray Bradbury would insist that you memorize it.
Yeah, I need to memorize that one.
if you're going to be the one that carries that one through the future dystopia, and you're going to be the what is it, the dust jacket of
what is it? Of Gunga Din?
The vagabook. The vagabook.
Yeah. Gunga Din. I'd have to that one's got such slang in it. It's hard, but that'd be fun. What about
one
you?
quickly with me, and then I'd like to ask if you have a theme for the novel. So just real quick with me, the first experience for me is thinking of a movie I saw called As It Is in Heaven, Wie in Himmel,
Hmm.
and it's I think I forget I didn't revisit the movie. I watched it like 10 years ago, and I wept and wept, and like I had for nothing else. And it's not one that I'm ready to revisit yet. But that would be one where it was peeled back, and I saw myself, pores and all, in it.
Hmm.
So
That's good.
you got a theme?
I mean, I don't know if I have a single theme actually, because I think it obviously has a lot to do with censorship. Um, guys, the burning book theme is the big idea behind it, and the I think of Dover Beach as going from ignorant armies clashing at night, the idea of going from ignorance to knowledge, and what that process is like. And you're
Mhm.
pushing on this idea of the reality, looking at the pores, being able to what's the ancient Greek
Yeah.
phrase, know thyself,
Mhm.
and that has to happen through literature to some degree, that's where that happens, or that's an instigating event to some
Yeah.
degree, is literature. And another one is Clarisse, but
Yeah.
Clarisse is a product of literature. She doesn't have her soul without literature, I don't think.
Or would you say that literature is a product of Clarisse?
So like literature is writing about Clarisse and her.
Or no, or that mindset that
I
she
mean that, yeah, that's
has
what I mean. Like it's not
is what, yeah.
literally, yeah, it's that, the person who was first sparked for this writing literature thousands of years ago saw a Clarisse type person and they were curious, or they had the same kind of memory or
Yeah,
mindset.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the romanticism of literature, that I like. I just don't know how to sum it up in a sentence or a phrase, but the gaining of individuality through letters or works of art, and through that process, something along those
Yeah.
lines.
Oh, that's
What about you? Do you
I
have anything?
I I have, yeah, I've got something. And of course it's always like putting clay on the potter's wheel and molding it.
Yeah.
Right now my latest one is like uh happiness comes in self-reflection rather than escapism.
Hmm. Okay. Happiness comes from self-reflection, not escapism.
And
And there is like
there's
an actual escape that he does. So he escapes a couple of times. Guy.
I no, I'm not thinking of
I know
that.
you're
I'm
not, but I'm
thinking,
just saying, like in plot
yeah.
wise, he does escape. And
So
he,
the yeah, the thing that I'm especially thinking of is the contrast between Clarice and Mildred.
yeah.
And his transformation is one of, I've got to become more honest with myself and know what's going on, and that discovery. And we brought up that question
Hmm.
that that he had for his wife. Where did we meet? And do you remember when we got an answer to that?
Yeah, I remember they didn't remember. I forgot what their answer was. Like,
So this was fascinating because we get the final moments of Mildred, and comes to the very end and the explosion of the city and everything, the society. I mean, it happens quickly. It blows up. But he has a vision or imagines Mildred's final moments,
hmm.
and he kind of pictures her in the room with the monitors while the war's going on outside, and like being glued to them, and I think even leaning forward on them, gaining that self-assurance. And then everything goes black, and in the split second before she blows up, she sees she sees a reflection of herself in the darkness,
Hmm.
and sees how
Like when all
horrid
the
and unhappy.
electricity goes out from the initial blast or something.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's what it
The
was.
yeah, the images that have been distracting her are gone, and then she's in the dark and she sees herself, and I don't remember the exact words, but it's horrifying to her at that moment, and she dies. So she gets that glimpse of herself
Yeah, like
that
her.
she didn't have. So that's what he imagines. her
Yeah.
that little bit of self-reflection.
Oof, I remember that now. Yeah, that's like that show Black Mirror. Like Black Mirror refers to your phones when it's turned off. It's a mirror, but it's like technology. So it's like I think, yeah, you're right. She sees herself in a reflection in that dark moment when all the technology has gone away. Right. And that's how, and she's being killed
Because
by,
she can't be distracted. Yeah.
she can't be distracted for that moment. Yeah. And I think that's such a powerful thing for all of us to reflect on. It's just the idea of, I do this all the time and I try to work on it and give myself moments of reflection, but just, can you go on a walk without your iPod, your iPhone, and without something in your ears? Like, can you just walk quietly by yourself? Like, I think it might be more difficult for people than they might think, because it is for me sometimes, because I always pop those guys in, right? There's always sound on my little seashells. There's always something. And that is, I think that's his message. And that's such a powerful thought is, can you sit for 3 hours and just no
Can sit for 3 minutes.
Yeah, 3 minutes.
That's why meditation has become important. Kirk, can I
So,
bring another voice in?
Oh yeah.
And read something that might take 2 minutes?
Please. Yeah.
So I gave an assignment to the students. One of the options was to write about how what happens and the ideas in Fahrenheit 451 anticipate today, a little bit like what you're just talking about right now. Can we go on a walk without our earbuds in? And so this is one student's answer, and his name's Gabriel, and I'll read this. And I thought it was especially eloquent in describing exactly what it is that you're indicating. Ray Bradbury created a world in which almost everyone, save for the small hidden minority, has been so overwhelmed by an overload to their senses that they have become completely docile. The world has become louder and brighter and fuller until it has bombarded the minds of people into a silent submission of their thoughts. The world today is indeed becoming faster. The way we communicate and treat each other is becoming short and abbreviated. Many of our thoughts get traded in for cheap thrills or even dull, slow focus on one worthless image after another on our phones, TVs, computers, etc. This is not all bad. There are many times when speed in life can be important or even a useful tool. But like most good ideas, this has been taken too far. The seashells, which are constantly broadcasting and any and all kinds of noise into Mildred's ear in Fahrenheit 451, have become a reality. I see all the time at work people talking to each other with white buds jammed into their ears, listening to God knows what. Is it meaningful to do anything in life if we need to have multiple focuses simultaneously pulling on our thoughts? I remember one time when I was performing magic in a restaurant. A little girl who couldn't have been more than 10 years old came up to me with headphones and her phone in a death grip. She didn't speak. She just looked at me. So, like a good performer, I began to show her some magic, even as I could hear music from her headphones. In the middle, she looked down and started typing. I stopped performing. She looked up with accusing eyes as if I had done something egregious, when all I had done was give her a moment to focus on things separately. She left soon after this moment. We have not reached a place equal to Bradbury's world of distractions. However, we do behave in many ways the same as Mildred and her friends, and worst of all, Captain Beatty. I meet few people who recognize this amount of stimuli keeping us busy every day, and fewer who can identify it as a problem. Most people will jump through hoops of fire to explain away why it's okay to have fewer and fewer unique thoughts and more distractions, car crashes, movies on bigger screens, portable screens in our bags that are slightly bigger than the ones in our pockets, seashells in our ears, and virtual plays we can join and act out from our home, video games. But at least the rings of fire will give these people some more stimulation to distract from one crucial thought. What for? The end.
So that was beautiful. That was an adult, or was that a kid?
No, that's a student. It's a student.
Like a high school student?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, he should be a writer.
I'll let him know.
Let him know. He should definitely be a writer. He has a good way with words, very clear and vivid. But yeah, that was wonderful. And I think Yeah, it's a good exercise, even if for people listening to this, I know Luke's missions with art is to have you experience art. You do it with paintings and sculptures, but also with literature. I do this specifically just with literature and poetry. And I think it's a really good exercise that people think through how these things apply to your life, because that's how you make artwork real to you. And so this Gabriel was talking about how, he sees the side of technology that Bradbury was afraid of, right? And Bradbury, by the way, is a guy who didn't ever fly in a plane. So he did have, even though he did science fiction, Martian Chronicles and Stranger to Strange Land, there's not a lot of tech in his things. He's a very different kind of science fiction writer. But it is an interesting flip side. Like I personally love technology. I think it's going to make us the greatest creatures in the universe eventually, if it not already. But we don't know if there's anybody else, right?
Breaking news: Kirk Barbera believes UFOs.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know. So yeah, but the point is that it's one of the great things, and maybe this is part of his, in his theme, is one of the great things about what literature can do is it can inspire you to build these technologies, but it can also warn you about, well, okay, these things can also happen. So remember, don't just have the earbuds. Be aware of this problem that technology brings, of the click, boom, bang, whop, walla, boom. Like that whole quick, digest. That whole thing, that's not good. You don't want a 15-minute digest of Hamlet and King Lear. You need to experience it, the whole thing.
And that's why you're here, Kirk.
That's why we are here. That's right. So, great. So any other last thoughts on Fahrenheit 451?
Well, I've got to rejoin my brethren by the campfire as we recite literature to each other.
Right. Yeah. And I got some Gunga Din to memorize. Well,
Kirk, this was a pleasure.
Yeah, that was fun.
Thank you for having me.
That was great. All right. Well, thank you. And I'll see you next time.